Good evening. Thank you for joining us this evening. I want to welcome you. This is our part of our School of Graduate Studies Spring Speaker Series. We started the speaker series back about 2 years ago when it was the 25th anniversary of graduate programs here at Elmhurst University, and we are now in our 27th year of having graduate programs here at Elmhurst University. My name is Carrie Hewitt. I am the Dean of our School of Graduate Studies, and I'm very happy to have you all here tonight. Tonight we have Felicia Shakespeare, who will be talking to us a little bit about leading with purpose, shaping your career, impact, and legacy. And I'm going to turn it over to Professor Lawrence Brown, LB, who is going to tell you a little bit more. And he is our current graduate program director for our MBA program, and he'll introduce our speaker for this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It is awesome to be here. I have my MBA 503 class with me tonight, and they've heard me talk oftentimes, as most of my students will hear, about networking. So the networking part is important because tonight is possible because it all started with a conversation that we had at homecoming, I think 2 years ago, if not 3 years ago. And we were out at the tailgate, and there was this larger than life personality that was buzzing around the event. And it always catches my attention to see the more extroverted personalities, because I myself am a raging introvert. So I'm the type of person where I want to be away from folks. So I don't mind when someone like Miss Shakespeare comes around and helps to lively up the crowd. What I've known and gotten to know about her is someone who has a heart and a centeredness around helping to developing others. And if you know anything about her, she is a global speaker. She has actually spoken here before as part of our TEDx. She has won several awards. I say a litany because anytime it's more than 10 or so, that's a litany. But one of the ones that stands out to me is when she won her Presidential Achievement Award. And what's significant about that is that she committed more than 4,000 volunteer hours towards helping, coaching, training, developing others. So that's the epitome of someone that pours into others. And I think that we will be in for a treat today when we hear more about what she's going to talk with us about. And with that, I'd like to introduce Miss Felicia Shakespeare.
Good evening, everyone. So I just want to say, first off, thank you so much to Mr. Lawrence Brown, the program director of the MBA program, Department of Business and Economics, and assistant professor. If it wasn't for him tonight, I would not be here, as he stated through that conversation that we had that has grown and blossomed into so much more. I really appreciate him and all that he has contributed to me in these few years, and also I know how he's impacted you as well. I also want to acknowledge Carrie Hewitt, the Dean of the School of Graduate Studies and Assistant Professor also President Troy Aiken, the President of Elmhurst University. I've never seen a college where the president was just a touch away. He makes himself so personable. Also, I want to thank and acknowledge the Elmhurst University Alumni Association Board of Directors, where I also serve as an alumni of Elmhurst. And in case you did not know, I am an alumni. Graduated in 1996 through this business school, so it's amazing. Also, to you, I'm considering you the esteemed guest tonight, the MBA students, the graduate students, alumni, and friends of mine, along with anyone from Elmhurst University. So thank you for being here. So I just want to emphasize the fact tonight that we're just going to have a conversation. Is that okay? We just want to have a conversation, because I think a lot of times, especially in the business sector, I remember, and I'll share this story. Coming into Elmhurst, and I was sharing a little bit tonight with Carrie and LB, how I actually started before Elmhurst. I was actually at UIC. And the reason I chose UIC, although I live 15 minutes away in Bellwood, Illinois, shout out to Bellwood. And with that said, I just thought it was going to be so much bigger, better, grander, 25, the big name, the big school in the big city, Chicago. We're all Chicago, no matter where we are in the suburban system or within the city limits. And I'll never forget, I was sharing the story how my first day of college, literally when I finally had worked so hard, and I don't want to skip over this, also shout out to Triton College, community college, where I actually started. And when I finally made that transfer over, the first day of school, I was completely overwhelmed. I literally cried because it was just, I felt like a fish that's out of the bowl. It was like, everyone was like, go get a number, go over here, go over there. And it felt so impersonable. So with that said, I like to talk about how when I went after my first semester there, I actually had a diagnosis where I actually had to I was told by my doctor, you need to take the next semester off because you're going to have a surgery. You're going to have a surgery. And I'm like, no, I just got here. Like that was negotiable, right? And he was like, well, what's more important to you, your life or school? I said, well, my life, obviously I can't go to school if I don't have a life. And I took that semester off. Unbeknownst to me, it would take another year or so because I had to obviously work and go to school. I was working and going to school. I was a commuter student and I had to take that year off. And then I finally made up my mind I was going to go back. And by happenstance, but I believe nothing is by happenstance, I opened up the Tribune and there was a program at Elmhurst University called the EMP. And it literally, I just went down the bullet points. I'm like, wow, this may work for me. This may be better. And the greatest thing I would say that brought me into the school, it wasn't just the marketing, although shout out to the marketing team because I would not have seen it had it not been for marketing. But when I got here, and I'm going to share this story, how I knew I had to still get my transcripts. How many of you all know you can't come into the new school without your transcripts? And the back office at Elmhurst, if I knew who those ladies were today, I would hug them and give them, just give them a thank you because they when I called and inquired and I explained the situation, those ladies was like, look, you're going to start. We're going to get you right in. You just come on. And I don't know if that's legal or not, but I don't know. Well, that was some time ago now, but they were just like, we're going to get you in, Miss Shakespeare, no matter what. And long and short, I was able, as long as you have to have your transcripts in by this date, but we're going to get you on board. And I knew then this was the school for me because of that act of kindness. So I just want to talk to you about, again, leading with purpose, shaping your career, impact, and legacy. So one thing we have to realize is, and one thing I realized as a student was success was not what I thought it was, right? Initially, in my mind, success represented the numbers behind your salary, right? That was one thing that was driving me. Success was, of course, the title behind your name. In my mind, I'm going to go to corporate America and I'm going to break through these ceilings and that's going to be that. But as time went on, it became more real to me. And I'll tell this other story about even my first successful position was also as a result of being at Elmhurst College. But with that said, there's something called successful but unfulfilled. Who's ever felt that you were, even though you had all of the things on paper, seemingly, but there was something missing? Just raise your hand if you don't mind a little participation. Who's ever felt that way? And after having the opportunity to work in corporate America before, and then during and after I graduated from college, I began to see that this is not necessarily fulfilling, right? This is something that is not giving me all of what I thought it was going to give me, right? I was able to travel. I was able to take on the salary. And I thought, and it was so funny, I was telling this story to someone the other day. Back in the day, I don't know if they're still doing that now, but when you were an undergrad, the whole thing about the salary was if it's at least your age and higher, who's ever heard that as the marker, you're doing real good. So when I had that opportunity, I won't name the company right now, but when I got that opportunity and I was able to navigate, and what I love about even the aspect of when I spoke at Elmhurst for the TEDx, it was about first. Even in that situation, I was the first woman in that organization, the first woman of color, the first person that looked like me, and that was me there. And that was one of many times that has happened over my lifetime. And I'll never forget, after going through that and navigating, and I'm gonna just be very real with y'all tonight, how I was at an executive roundtable. So sort of like what we're doing here tonight. Who's ever heard of an executive roundtable? So that's when the leader of the organization will bring you together, and he would bring different entities together to sit, and he would get to know you and just learn about who you are, because a lot of times you don't know who those folks are that are driving your organization. And I'll never forget, I was sitting there, and I had knew all of the effort I had put into it, and all of the, the shadowing. Who's ever heard that if you shadow, you do your job, you shadow with somebody else for the job that you want. I was doing all the things. I'm like, okay, I got this. With that said, and when we sat at that table, and the individual when he got to me, he was like, oh, what are your aspirations? And then I began to share that. And then he told me, oh, okay, well, you'll be in that job another 5 years, and then, we'll see where you're at. And can y'all imagine hearing that? So when you had your blueprint, but yet I knew what my purpose was, or I knew what my intentions were. But with that said, I knew at that point it was greater than me just going to the next step in this organization. That was my cue that it's time to move on. So we don't want to miss those flags, because at that point I knew I had a greater purpose than to sit here and let somebody dictate to me. And that was the journey, as we're talking about tonight, leading with purpose, shaping your career, impact, and legacy. That was the moment I realized that I'm going to have to take charge of what's going to happen now, right? Although I was very naive, I'll be very honest, very naive, had this very hopeful view. It didn't matter to me. I was never the type of person. And shout out to my parents, because they raised us to always just accept everybody and just work hard and show up and be consistent and have integrity, all the things. So I just thought that was going to be a given, right? That I was going to use those same things that I had learned as a child. And now I can grow up and implement that. But that was not what corporate America was telling me. So as time went on, I was able to navigate in the organization. And ultimately, I knew it was time to make a pivot. So back to my point of successful but unfulfilled. But at that point, I had doubled my salary. I had traveled all over the country in the position that I had. I was working from home, all the things. But something in me was not fulfilled. It was something that I knew I had more to do. It was just not the last stop for me. So I want to tell you right now, according to the Gallup in 2023, 70% of employees say their sense of purpose is defined by their work. Yet only 18% strongly agree that they get to do what they do best every day. Isn't that something? Only 18% of people are feeling like they're actually flowing in what they were meant to do. And I always like to define purpose as your reason, right? Your reason for being. If you don't know your purpose, how are you able to go on and do the thing, right? Because you don't know what the thing is. And with that said, I'll step back a little bit. Even as that young girl growing up in Bellwood, again, always taking the initiative. And I'll never forget when I got my first job. I was real strategic, LB. I was in high school and I was like, my first job was at Walgreens. And I was like, wait, these guys, they're making me work every weekend, every Sunday, all the holidays. This is not working for me. So here I am as a 17-year-old. I said, there was the Bank of Bellwood, LaToya. And I said, wow, okay, weekends off, Sundays at least, half a day on Saturday, all the holidays. I'm gonna be real strategic here. So here I am in high school, went on over, and I walked in and I wanted to play. And they're like, young lady, you really have to be 18 years old. And I was 17. Well, guess what? He's like, you know what? I like you. So I'm gonna give you an opportunity. I'm gonna give you a chance. And that's how it all started again. But with that said, again, having such a uninhibited perspective of what life could do, again, working hard, doing all the things. But again, seeing the markers along the way. So with that said, what ended up happening is I was learning how to be so good in business, but yet I knew part of me did have another interest in the field of education. I'm like, okay, what am I going to do here? What am I going to do? And ultimately, because I was doing a great job, they were like, Ms. Shakespeare, we will help fund your education, but it has to be in business. Now, who understands that? You're at a crossroad. Now, here you are. You know what you really want to do, but you know you have the resources over here that are going to help you do what you need to do. So I was at what they call it a strategic inflection point. And at that point, I had to make a decision. Now, the beauty of it is I began to like this thing called business. I felt I was good at it. I enjoy working with customers. Even if you go back and listen to my TEDx talk, I talk about my first encounter with Doreen Dukes, the vice president, and how when I picked up the phone the wrong way, not so professional because I didn't understand what that was at that time. And she got on me. She said, you don't answer the phone like that. This is the Bank of Bellwood, and she told me how to introduce myself. And that began my journey on a professional track and again into the business sector. But what I want to say to you is the question becomes, and I want you to think about it. What is it? And this is my question for 2025, even right now. What is it that you really want? I want you to think about that. What is it that you really want? And I think once you can answer that question, that will lead you to understanding what your purpose is in this season. I always tell people that purpose in one season can be one thing. Obviously, when I was 25 years old, my purpose and my mission and my goals were all different than they are at this stage of my life, right? As I was, again, budding in my career at that time, right out of college. But the quote I always think about, and this is one of the most, if you've never heard of him, you want to write his name down, Dr. Miles Monroe, MYLES, MUNORE. He's one of the most prolific leaders of our time, in my opinion. And there is a quote, and I'm going to use some of his quotes tonight. And he said, the greatest tragedy in life is not death, but the life without purpose. So what does it mean to walk in your purpose? It means that you're finding your path, and again, as I navigated through and chose business, which I have no regrets, because I really feel like everything I learned in business prepared me to make the pivot when I was forced to do so and when I chose to do so. But purpose, again, I think in the times that we're in right now is so much uncertainty. There's so many people just trying to figure out what's next. We had so many people that, again, they bought that dream, whatever that dream was. There was a time that you could plan on taking a position. And if you chose to work it, especially in particularly the government sector, as I think about the government sector, you could just plan on staying there as long as you chose to, right? And then you just navigate, you retire, you just had this whole plan. But what do you do when there's so much uncertainty in the world? There's a lot to consider, right? So the question also becomes, is purpose just part of my passion, or is it something that I need to expel beyond that, right? So purpose isn't just passion. I like to say it like this. It's the intersection of your strengths, your values, and the impact that you want to make. I'll say that again. Purpose isn't just a passion. It's the intersection of your strengths, values, and the impact that you want to make. So even as we think about real world examples, as we are in a business mode, because I am here with the MBA students, I want to give you some of that information too. When we think about a lot of times, sometimes we need to probably learn a little bit more about the history behind a business. So even when I think about LinkedIn, Reid Hoffman, he built a platform, not just for networking, but for what? Economic empowerment. In case you didn't know, one of his reasons for creating LinkedIn, right? Also, when we think of Howard Schultz, who created Starbucks, he built a brand around human connection. Now, a lot of us think of coffee, right? But it's not about the coffee. Now, I'm not even a coffee drinker, but I promise you can find me in Starbucks at least 2 or 3 times a week, potentially. Now I've kind of cut back on that a little bit, but I love the strawberry acai and the hot chocolate. Who else? Is anybody else with me? I never go to Starbucks for coffee. But with that said, when you think of these real world examples, again, the basis for building for connection, right? Human connection. So again, back to our topic, leading with purpose, shaping your career, impact, and legacy. I always say this, whether you are an entrepreneur or whether you are a career professional, you are always representing yourself, right? You are your brand, right? No matter what. When you show up every day, and I always encourage people to think of it like this. If you have an aspiration one day to become an entrepreneur, you have to ask yourself, what type of employee am I? Are you one that has integrity? Are you clocking in? Are you working the hours that you are being given with fidelity? It's easy, and so when we look at it like that, and I always say this, in life, everything is a seed. I truly believe that. We are always sowing into something. So what is it that you think about as far as when you are working? Are you giving it your all? And at the end of the day, if you're giving it everything that you have, do you know you're sowing a seed into your future too? So that means if I'm faithful and if I'm consistent and if I care about this organization, guess what? This is going to open the door eventually for me to move on. And that's how it worked for me. That was like the secret sauce, right? Everything led to the next thing. So nothing is ever wasted. As we continue on, I want you to also think about the fact that I want you to think about, if you could jot down, if you can, or just somewhere in your phone or even in your notebook, if you have one, 3 values that you refuse to compromise in your career. What are 3 things that you refuse to compromise? Again, we're leading with purpose, shaping our careers, thinking about impact and our legacy. I want to say this, everything starts with a decision. So when people lead with purpose, they're more resilient to burnout and better positioned for influence. So another thing about purpose, again, once you're walking in your purpose, and I always say purpose evolves, I feel that, and I want you to think about the fact that it doesn't even feel like work, right? The other side to that as well is thinking about what you were born to do. You were born to make a difference, not just make a living. Now, we've heard that before, and that's another quote, if you haven't heard it, from Dr. Miles Monroe. You were born to make a difference, not to make a living. And what does that mean for you? You have to ask yourself that every single day. I want to move on to the aspect we're talking about, leadership, right? Leading with purpose in practice. So again, these are what I would call the traits of what we call a purpose-driven leader. Integrity. We hear that word a lot. But what is integrity? And I'll be very honest with you, even today, guys, I was challenged with an integral moment. What is integrity? Doing what's right when no one's watching, right? Doing what's right because it's just the right thing to do. Because why? The first and foremost framework has to be how you believe. What are your core values? I always tell people, I don't care if you're an entrepreneur or an employee, you're always with you. And that was one thing I learned, even in corporate America, it was so hard sometimes to show who you were, right? Because you were so busy in being in a role, and especially imagine when I gave you this scenario, imagine being the first or the only and not really knowing, right, how to navigate. So thank God for mentorship, right? I was able to finally get a mentor and get some guidance. So there is power in that as well. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But integrity, doing what's right. I think that's the number one trait of a purpose-driven leader. Also, vision. Having a clear directive as to where you're going, right? Or where the organization is going. And again, you have to have these as your personal points. What does integrity mean to you as an individual? What vision do you have? And I told y'all about the vision I had for myself, right, to move on out of that organization. But when I saw someone else did not have that same vision, then I had to think ahead and think twice about what was next for me. Also, empathy. Now, this is so important. What is empathy? It's basically putting yourself into someone else's shoes. And I think, too, that has been a huge proponent of my development, I would say, over the last decade, particularly. Because, again, life brings you so many different things, right? Both personally and professionally. And as I said, as professional as I became through the likes and learnings of my career, a time in the banking industry, my career and time at IBM and beyond, I began to understand that, guess what? It does not take away my humanity, right? I'm bringing myself every single day. And a lot of times people are struggling because they're not able to have that outlet. But more importantly, what I've learned is always to put myself in someone else's shoes. Always think about, how would that make me feel? You know, or how could I say this in a way that it's just conveying the point, you know, and that's it. The last thing I want to say, the trait of a purpose-driven leader is courage. You have to have courage. What is that? In my definition, courage is strength to rise above, right? You rise above the rest. You have to be willing, and it's sort of a risky thing, right? To have courage means you're renouncing fear, even if you feel the fear, right? Fear is always there, but what is it that you can do to renounce it? I think of the founder of Tom's, those shoes, and the social impact that he's had, right? To just rise above and think about the idea. And many of us, I'm telling you right now, there's not one idea that I'm aware of when you even study business and entrepreneurship and different individuals who have succeeded where they did not have rejection, some form of rejection, but they were willing to keep showing up. And again, when you know your purpose in the situation, you can always continue to come back around. And I always say, for me, a no is just a not yet, right? I've been told no many times, but for me, no is truly not yet. I want to take you on a little journey again. I was thinking of another real world example, and of course, us being from the Chicagoland area. And it was really great, actually fascinating to me when I learned about this. If you did not know, who's ever been to Walgreens? I talked about Walgreens. So how apropos to have that. That was my first job at 16, but I began to do some research. And the former CEO of Walgreens, her name was Rosalind Brewer. She advanced equity at Walgreens by increasing diverse representation in leadership and prioritizing inclusive hiring practices. She expanded supplier diversity, ensuring more contracts went to minority and women-owned businesses. And she made history in 2021 as the first Black woman to serve as CEO of Walgreens Boots Alliance, and was the only Black woman leading a Fortune 500 company at that time. So you have to ask yourself about your leadership. How do you want to show up, first of all? And then more importantly, how does your leadership show up when no one is watching, right? So everyone has a purpose. And even in that, Rosalind's purpose was just to expand, right, the mindset of those at that time and to give opportunity to those who may not have had the opportunity. So as leaders, again, leading with purpose, shaping your career with impact and legacy, what is it that you want to be known for? That's what I always think of as legacy. But the aspect of legacy also is living right now. Do you all realize that all we have is right now? Do you ever think of it like to that extent, like all you have is right now? You can do nothing about yesterday. You can do nothing about 5 minutes ago. We're living in the moment. And I think what has driven me, and if you didn't know, the name of my business is A Purpose-Driven Woman. I had a whole epiphany when I got that name out. I may not have time to share tonight, but maybe when I speak to you guys at another time. But again, understanding that all you have is right now makes it more surreal. And I think, again, with the times that we're in this moment, I want you to be hopeful and know that there is something that you were created to do that no one in this world can do just like you. Does that make sense? I'm going to say it again. There is something that you were created to do in this world that no one can do in the way that you can do it. So when you set out to do something, whether it be to become an entrepreneur, whether it be to advance in your career and be a vice president, or whether it be to write a book, whatever the case may be, there are many individuals, right? There are many organizations. But what is it going to be that you're going to do differently to make you stand out? I have another statistic that millennials and Gen Z are 2.5 times more likely to prioritize purpose over paycheck, according to Deloitte, the 2023 Global Survey. They are not playing. This next generation is pretty bold. So what is it that you want to do? And I always say this, it's never too late. The time is now. But the key is, are you going to be resilient? Are you going to be consistent? And are you going to put in the work? Because purpose is not fluffy either, guys. I want to get that out the way. Purpose is work. Just because you find your purpose, that doesn't mean it's going to be this bed of roses that you're just going to walk on through the tulips. I found my purpose. It doesn't work like that. Purpose means now that I know what it is, now I got to do the work. So another point I would make is, again, are you clear? Have you brought clarity to your own self as to what it is that you want to do? Secondly, are you willing to be courageous? Courageous enough to rise above, to come against all obstacles, and those obstacles that come against you, are you willing to stay the course? And then finally, take action. You have to take action. I would not have met LB had I not took action. Someone told me about who he was. It was another colleague there. I was like, oh yeah, definitely would like to meet him. And through that, but guess what? I could have stopped right there. But because I took action, and because he meant what he said, he followed up with the individuals that were there that day that wanted to work with him. I don't know. I know it was three of us together that spoke to him. I didn't speak to him one-on-one. It was three of us speaking to him. So I would wonder, I can ask privately, did anybody else follow up? But because of that, again, when you choose to take action, the possibilities are limitless, guys. So again, there is nothing impossible, right? Purpose is not a title you earn. It's a decision that you make. And I'll quote, I love this quote by Dr. Monroe. It's my last quote from Dr. Miles Monroe that I thought was so appropriate. He said, "You were not born to be employed. You were born to be deployed." Y'all hear that? You were not born to be employed. You were born to be deployed. There is a higher calling on your life when you understand your purpose. Again, not just working to survive. So I'm going to challenge you today. And I know your MBA is going to open many doors for you. And I'm encouraged, I am a lifelong learner, guys. So I never shun. I will always support, because I am a lifelong learner, and I've been that, and I believe in the power of your education. And I truly believe that your education is a tool. But your MBA may open doors, but your purpose decides which ones you will walk through. The titles you earn, the salaries you command, the roles you hold, those are all your milestones, right? I talked about those milestones. But your legacy, right? That's measured by the lives you touch, the change you create, and the courage you show when no one's clapping. So I'll leave you with this. Don't just lead with your resume. Lead with your reason. Because in a world full of noise, purpose is truly your power. Thank you. Yeah, it's going to be a Q&A. I didn't know if I need to initiate that. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Do you feel like your purpose can change throughout your life, or do you think once you hone in on one purpose, it stays the same?
Thank you. That's a great question. Absolutely, it can change. It's a fact of evolution. I really believe that change is inevitable, right? Again, back to my point, and I didn't even get to share how I pivoted out of business into education to earn my postgraduate degrees. But yes, your purpose will change. It must change because why? You're growing as a person. So it's okay. And even in the middle of just making those changes, just have confidence and know that, it's about the long haul. It's not about pleasing others all the time. And sometimes that can become a barrier because we're looking at what we think we should be doing, but what is our hearts telling us to do? And I'll never forget back to my point of I don't know if I shared this part. Let me share it real quick. When I was in the Career Center here, right before I was going to graduate, I pulled out 5 jobs. So now everything's digital now. We don't have to do that now. But back then you pulled them out of the binder. And I applied for every job, all 5 of them. They were very interesting companies. And everyone called me back. That was the cool part. But each time I got when you finish, I had one more semester here. We'll call us back when you finish. But the one job I wanted, IBM, guess what? Just it resounded back to what? The bank. They were like, Miss Shakespeare, I'll never forget her name. I could say her name. Her name was Marilyn Claywell. That was the hiring manager. And she's like, Felicia, I just want you to know I interviewed 9 people for this job, but I'm going to hire you. We don't traditionally hire individuals that haven't finished, but we're going to hire you. But I just have to have you meet my boss, go through da-da-da-da. And the icing on the cake was when I met her boss, he was like, yeah, she really wants to hire you. And I just think, we're going to move forward. You don't normally do this. But you know what? Not only are we going to hire you, Felicia, we're going to also pay for your last courses at Elmhurst. So not only did I get hired, they paid for me to finish. And I went on to work there successfully. So I hope that answered your question. Anyone else have a question? Yes.
Yeah, do you have any strategy for finding your purpose?
Great question. What are you good at?
Working hard.
Now, this is a rhetorical question, by the way. You don't have to answer right now because we're all good at that. So I'm gonna read what I wrote in here because in case that came up. Purpose isn't something you stumble upon, right? It's something you uncover through movement. So I'll say movement, reflection, and alignment. Okay. So start by asking these 3 questions. What do I do well naturally? What do people come to me for? And what frustrates me in the world that I feel called to change? So I think if you lead out, and I'll read those again. What do I do well? What do people come to me for? And what frustrates me in the world that I feel called to change? I think that's a way to get started along that path if you feel that you are not satisfied doing what you're doing right now. Hope that helped. Any other questions? Yes.
What tips would you give for someone who is going through a career change and find that their career has shifted and maybe they're kind of in this fuzzy mindset because they feel that their purpose is changing? So what tips would you give for someone?
Ooh, I am you. That happened. That exact thing happened to me. And I'll never forget again. So I'll say this, guys, I want to finish that IBM story. So after I got that, look, you're going to be in this job 5 years. I'm like, I got to go. So I literally started looking and I was blessed, again, took action. And I was blessed to receive another position in another part of the organization. And that led to even additional promotions and other things along the way. But there got to a point after 7 years there I literally felt like this is not what I want to continue to do. Okay, I'm enjoying this. I'm enjoying the working from home. The pay is what I wanted. I'm traveling once a month at my choice. My manager, he's remote. I'm remote. It just worked. But it's like, but that was not enough. So what ended up happening inadvertently in that situation, they went into a surplus program. Y'all know what that is? Who can tell me what a surplus program is in the MBA program? That's when they want to downsize the organization. Like it's one too many of y'all here, right? And every year up to that point, it had been a voluntary surplus program. Like every year in May, at that time when Lou Gerstner was the CEO, IBM was. I always tell people when I was at IBM then was what Apple is now. It was like the place to be. And every year they would give out incentives to the whole company if we met our goals. The whole company got something in May. You got paid. With that said, but they also gave you an opportunity to, if you wanted to, leave the organization, take a package, the severance package. It was your choice. So every year I've been there 7 years. It was like, oh no, I'm good. But that final year, it was a situation where I was the last one in, first one out. I was not new to the company, but I was new to this department. I had transferred to another department. As I said, there was several promotions that came. And with that said, that forced me into like, okay, well, no, I'm just going to, at first I'm like, well, I'll just go to another part of the company. I'll just start applying for jobs. But every door was closed. I said, this is something. So then I just had to be very reflective, like, wait a minute, clearly I've done everything I'm supposed to do and it's not working. So I would say to you, the long way to get to that answer is monitor the signs. Look at what's happening. Sometimes we're fighting against something and our time is up and it's time to move on. And when those doors, every door is not meant to open. It's meant for you to think. And I will honestly say I had an epiphany, again, having a conversation with my father. I'll never forget him telling me, he said, didn't you always want to go into education? I was like, yeah, I sure. It was like the lights came on, guys. I knew in that moment, And when I made the interest, when I made the switch, literally everything opened up. So that's my recommendation to you. The program fell in place. Not only did a program fall in place, an accelerated program, a grant that went with the program. It was just like, I was hired to be a spokesperson for the program. It was just like all these things being given consulting opportunities immediately upon graduation. It just all aligned. So again, back to alignment. Those are your markers. So so try the methods, but if those aren't, just start reflecting and even seek counsel for those that you know, like, and trust as well. Thank you. Yes.
You mentioned taking action as being the most important thing. How do you motivate yourself to take action you don't want to, and how do you maintain that motivation?
Now that's $1 million question there. If anybody else want to chime in, I just think it boils down to resilience. And there's a phrase that I've heard in life called, how bad do you want it? Have you ever heard that? How bad do you want to succeed? Again, you are you're the driver of your life. You're in the driver's seat. You have to decide how important moving forward is to you and how quickly you want to get there through the choices that you make. So that's what we have to say. So I've always kind of had this, I don't know what it is, but just a resilience, and I actually, I can't say I know what it is. I can say, even looking back as a young girl, I can literally go back. I'll never forget my 3rd grade teacher. Isn't that crazy? Teachers are amazing, guys. Who can remember that special teacher that really, they get a lot of slack, but I promise you, I will never forget how, and this is my favorite quote by Maya Angelou, who was actually on this campus, guys. The day I graduated, can you believe it? She was here in February 1996 on this campus for Black History Month, and I didn't go because I was at home celebrating with the family. I just always regret that now. But with that said, there's a quote that she said, people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And that teacher believed in me. She was not even of the same culture as me, but she believed in me. She always affirmed me, and I knew then I want to be something. I didn't know what, but I knew just from that, it planted seeds. So what did I say earlier? Everything is a seed. So you just have to start and just water it, and protect it. That's my second bit of advice to you. Sometimes you have to just reflect and not share everything with everyone until, it's just like we know right now we're in spring. We're hitting on spring, right? And people are planting seeds. But we know we can't see what's happening germinating underground, right? But what's going to ultimately happen? There's going to be a crop. It's going to come out only if it's what? If it's nurtured, if it's given water, if it's given food, given sunlight. So that's what I would say. Look at your life as a seed. You are literally here to do something great. You just have to plant yourself in the right space. Yes.
So you said that millennials and Gen Zs are more likely to prioritize service over paycheck.
Yes.
How do you recommend finding that balance to focus on your purpose when you can't necessarily afford less of a paycheck?
Great question. That's the real life, right? We all have responsibility. Everybody say responsibilities. It takes time. It takes planning. So I would say you have to come up with a plan. And I was listening to this couple recently. If you ever watch, it's the Home Improvement Network. I can't think of what it's HGTV. There's a couple, Egypt, Sharad, and she was talking about everything I do. I create a business plan. Even when we go on vacation with my family, we had a whole business plan. So I would say you have to get a plan of action, right? It's not that it may always happen overnight, but it's something that you have to get on the radar and start making actual steps towards if you want to see those things happen in your life. And I think again, I think sometimes we play ourselves too small. Sometimes we just don't think about the fact that if we just take action one step at a time, conquer one thing. Maybe you have to start with I got to save this much first because I know once I make this leap into this new thing that I want to do, I'm going to have to make sure things are secure. What else could I do? Even myself, recently I made some decisions this year because I have some bigger goals. So I had to think about the bigger picture, and I made a drastic change, and now I'm on the track. It's a journey. So it's not overnight, but it can be done. Yes.
We talk about resiliency, right? Some folks kind of inherently have that resiliency. Some folks may need to develop that more. How do you propose that people who need to develop that more do so?
We spoke in the bathroom, didn't we?
We did.
I thought so. How you doing? Good. Good to see you. Again, that is something I always say. It's just like money can't buy certain things. I just think again through trial and error in life, and conquering things in your own life. When I say that, just really, really getting to know yourself. And I'm grateful for a parent that really taught me, Felicia, you need to know you. You got to get to know yourself. And that's really like an oxymoron. It's like we're so busy trying to do everything outwardly until we forget and negate sometimes to actually get to know ourselves. And as time has went on, I've gotten to know myself. I've gotten to know my triggers. I got to know, again, where I rise up to the occasion. Again, what I was just sharing just with this gentleman, taking note of what you're really good at. Resilience is just, again, it's the best way I could describe resilience. It's like a bobblehead. You just got to keep on going, no matter how much you get knocked down. That's what I think that's the muscle. I think that's what has caused it to happen. I've just been this person that no matter what, and it's almost like if you tell me I can't, now I gotta really show you. That's just something in me. But each one of us are uniquely made. You just have to figure out what is the thing you feel fearful of, and just go at it head on. Because we all have fear. There's a certain level of fear no matter what you do on a daily basis. But you can do it, but you have to just take one step at a time. And then as you do that, you gain the confidence, right? Get a coach too. If necessary, you may have to get a mentor. I would say that again, all of those things have helped me along the way. It's not one thing that happens, it's a conglomerate of all those things. But I think the greatest thing, self-determination. Just never give up on yourself. Guys, thank you guys so much. And I want to give you, I have something, who was the first one to ask the question? And who was the second one? I think it was 1, 2, and 3. So I have a gift for you guys. I have a book I'm going to give you guys. You Are Your Brand, Building from the Inside Out. That was the book I wrote. And actually, it was the theme of the TED Talk that I did. So thank you all for having me. I really appreciate the time that you've given tonight.